Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome. And I'd like to thank Louis for getting my last name right. That was spot on. Grew up with that name. Can you imagine? Starts with the letter A. I'm first on roll call every day in class, right? If anybody's interested, my slide deck is available for you. You can access it just by directing your browsers to bit.ly/scenic K-12 if you're interested in following along. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about the work that we've been doing at the TechSets organization as well as the San Diego County Office of Education. Just a bit of background about what TechSets is. It's the Technical Statewide Education Technology Service. It's been around for about 12 years. We've been with a project of the Department of Education here in California, and our primary goal is to support IT professionals across the state who work in the education technology sector. And that project has been administered through the San Diego County Office of Education, which is where my office is, and where I get a chance to work with some incredibly talented folks who are bent on making sure that our students get the best technology that they possibly can get. So this presentation is primarily about equity, and the perspective that TechSets and the San Diego County Office of Education have is directly linked to the statement that you see up on the screen. And I'm wondering if anybody would be, if you wouldn't mind participating in a quick hand poll here. How many of you would agree with this statement that's up on the screen, that for K-12 education, being connected is just no longer a convenience, it's a necessity? Anybody agree with that? Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think for the most part, that's what we see when we're out there talking to stakeholders, parents, students, and of course even our business partners, that they're finally starting to come around to it, that it's no longer a luxury like it was perhaps back in the mid-90s. And so with that in mind, our superintendent at the San Diego County Office of Education, Dr. Randy Ward, along with Assistant Superintendent Mr. Stephen Clemons, set out back in '09 to do something about it. Because thanks to the good work of the K-12 HSN, the high-speed network here in California, run by Mr. Louis Wong and Mrs. Terry Sanders, of course, thanks to Scenic, we're able to afford good, strong internet connectivity to the classrooms. But part of the problem that we've started to note is that the classroom isn't the only place that students learn. As a matter of fact, more and more we're starting to see that students actually learn quite a bit outside of the classroom. And without access to the net, that learning becomes somewhat hindered. And so what we came to recognize is that the digital divide, the folks who have access to the internet and the folks who don't have access to the internet, and we're talking about at home primarily, is really more of a opportunity divide, because of the number of educational opportunities are missed by students who don't have access to the internet at home, not to mention the economic opportunities. I'm going to show you some statistics in just a little bit that demonstrate that it's not just about learning. There's a lot of stuff is bought and sold on the internet. A lot of government functions are held on the internet. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. If there's anybody in the state who knows this, it's you folks. But more and more healthcare is moving towards the internet. So we really see this more of a civil rights issue, a matter of equity and ethics, more so than a technological problem. And so we set out to do some work with some partners, including the Federal Communications Commission, who we've been working with now directly since 2011, an organization that I'm sure many of you have heard of called the One Economy Corporation, as well as the Connect to Compete nonprofit organization, which we're going to share a little bit of our work with them, with you in just a little bit. But first, some statistics, some facts, and this is primarily coming to us from the Federal Communications Commission. We were able to work with Mr. Josh Gottheimer, who is the second in command of the FCC last year, who laid out some incredible statistics that the FCC had been exploring. One of which, as you can see up on the screen, is that U.S. home broadband adoption rate is about 68%, which was shocking, particularly when he backed it up with the next piece of data that in places like Korea, places like Singapore, that number is more like 90%. Some other statistics. 80% of the Fortune 500 companies require online applications. So if you can't access the net, you can't even apply to work at Target or to work at Walgreens. 50% of jobs today require digital literacies, and we're not talking about just how to use Google. We're talking about some more basic concepts, like, for example, what the escape key is, and what the return key does, and how a mouse works, and how webcams and printers and so forth work. And that number 50% is projected to jump up to 77% by 2020. And we'll make sense out of why digital literacies matter in context of broadband access at the home site. Oh, and I apologize for the little picture being overlaid there, but at last year's CES, the FCC did some informal gathering, the FCC did some informal data gathering, and what they noted is that 70% of the best-selling mobile applications were targeted for school-aged children. Kids from 7 years old up to about 17 or 18 years old. So the industry certainly sees that school-aged children are a huge market. I think of all the statistics that I'm sharing with you, this is the one that jumps out at me the most. That 76% of classroom teachers are currently assigning internet-based homework. So I think this is the slide that just clarifies it for me more than anything else. This isn't just about the haves and the have-nots. Our kids are being mandated to go online and learn and do their homework. And I'm sure you can appreciate what happens when some kids have the internet at home and some kids who don't have the internet at home. 6 to 8% of our students who have the internet at home actually have a 6 to 8% higher graduation rate. Now, if that doesn't cut it nice and dry, I don't see what else does. Can you imagine if we were able to offer the internet to more of our students? We can see our graduation rates jump up by nearly 8%, as you can see. And again, this isn't information that's coming from an education-based organization. Remember, this is the FCC that's telling us this information. A couple more statistics, just to make the case even further, is technology-infused instruction can actually reduce the amount of time that students take to reach a particular goal by about 30 and all the way up to 80%, depending on the objectives that the students are working towards. So I mentioned earlier that the home broadband connectivity is approximately 67 to 68% of an adoption rate, which leaves about 100 million Americans basically without access to home broadband. And who are these 100 million Americans? Well, they're probably who you thought they might be, the low-income folks who have a lower level of education, and, closest to my heart, students. Not to mention the elderly, of course, minorities, folks who are disabled, as well as residents of tribal lands. Now, of that 100 million Americans who don't have access to home broadband, 33% of them access the internet using dial-up or perhaps going to a third party like a library. 66% of them simply do not use the internet whatsoever. It's almost like an undiscovered country to what amounts to approximately 65, 66 million Americans. So why don't these folks have broadband at home? Well, the FCC, along with a number of different organizations, have come to realize that there are basically three reasons, and the first one, obvious, cost. It's not cheap for kids and parents and families to have access to the internet at home, but there are two other reasons. The second reason is digital literacy. That is to say that parents don't know how to use computers, and kids don't know how to use computers. Yes, they can get off Facebook. They might be able to see a video on YouTube. They might be able to play their video games, but that's a long ways away from being digitally literate. That is to say, being able to use search engines for academic purposes, being able to use advanced search tactics like using site operators and in-text operators and validating information that they find on the internet. The third reason is simply relevancy. Families just don't think they need it. They don't think that the internet is something that's of import to them. And so, with the help of some partnering organizations, we set out to see what we can do about that. Now, the cost issue, of course, is a major one to try to tackle. And so we realize that that's going to be the holy grail for us. If we can make ways towards the cost problem, I think we'll be able to tackle a majority of the problem. But that's a gargantuan problem. That goes, in my opinion, well beyond the scope of what a K-12 organization can do, such as an intermediary organization like TextX or the San Diego County Office of Education. But digital literacy and relevancy, that's something that's right up our bailiwick. This is the kind of stuff that we can get a handle on, because it's primarily about educating the people. So we started connecting with the Federal Communications Commission. And FCC is fully aware, as you can see from the statistics that they've provided us of this major problem. So what are they doing about it? What's the federal government doing about this? Well, they've set forward 3 E-rate reform programs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the E-rate program. The E-rate is a program that's it's one of 4 programs that the federal government provides for school districts as well as libraries to be able to support connectivity, to be able to access the internet. One of the projects that they put together, however, was called the Learning on the Go pilot program, and I'll explain that in just a little bit, because one of the problems with E-rate dollars is that you can't use it for anything that's off campus. And so the Learning on the Go project, which was in pilot mode, starting in late 2011, said, well, let's experiment. And we'll get to that in just a second. But there are 2 other reforms that unfortunately are slowly starting to peter out. Some would argue they never even got off the ground. But this is what the FCC is intended to get done. One is to put together something called the Superfast fiber program, which, to put it in a short sentence, it's about accessing the dark fiber that's available throughout the country to be able to provide families who don't have access to the internet with access to the internet. Additionally, they put forward a program called School Spots. And this program was primarily developed to say, well, you know, yeah, we are already providing the internet to our schools and the libraries on our campuses, but most schools are shut down by 3 or 4 o'clock. Why don't we give access to the community after 3 or 4 o'clock? So if the folks needed to access that bandwidth or that internet connectivity, they can come and use the school's connections. Again, as I mentioned, the first of the 3 programs got off to a flying start, but the other 2 didn't go very far. It's not to say that they will never go very far, but at this point, we're not seeing much about them. So I mentioned the logo. The EDU 2011 is actually the name of the program. It's called the E-rate Deployed Ubiquitously program. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue here. But the EDU 2011 program was geared, as I mentioned earlier, primarily to support this idea that kids need the internet at home, and we need to be able to use the E-rate funding that's administered through the Universal Service at home. And so what they did is they provided 20 projects, 19 schools and 1 library, funding. Direct funding with $9 million. And the idea was to take these $9 million and say, okay, let's see what you can do with it. Let's give the kids access to the internet off campus, and let's see whether or not that's going to make a big difference. And you can see up on the screen what the different types of projects were. 10 netbook or laptop programs. There were a couple of online school programs that were kicked off, 3 handheld device programs, and 5 what we refer to as combined technology programs came about. But the 5th bullet point was really telling for me that the program was 370% oversubscribed. People started clamoring for this, saying, yes, yes, the government needs to help us. We want to do this. Well, that pilot program was kicked off in late 2011. The funding, unfortunately, didn't get to the schools until, I want to say, early summer of 2012. And as of today, 7 out of the 20 projects have yet to provide a report to the FCC about how things are coming along with them. And let me tell you why. They couldn't even access the internet because of the rural nature of their settings. Even though they had the money, they couldn't find an ISP to even get the connectivity to the students in the first place, despite the fact that they had these monies. Now, this project is due to sunset April of this year, and we're still waiting to find out more about whether or not this experiment was worthwhile. So from these experiments thus far, we've come to conclude that yes, we do need government support, but there's more to it than that. There are other ways to get our parents and our families to adopt broadband at home. First of all, let's not recreate the wheel. Let's maybe take a look at what else is available out there, because there are multiple adoption efforts occurring throughout the country, including Comcast, who's right here with us today. Comcast's Internet Essentials program, the Centurylink Internet Basics program. These are programs that basically provide students who come from lower economic or socioeconomically disadvantaged families access to the internet at a ridiculously reduced rate, something to the effect of $10 a month. Other programs, for example, the Connect America Fund. This is a national program that's set up to try to, well, in essence, connect those rural counties and rural cities with the internet. One of the programs that the TechSets and the San Diego County Office of Education really jumped on was the Connect to Compete system. Now, just by show of hands, how many of you have heard of this, the Connect to Compete service? Okay, so as you can see, this is one of the troubles that the Connect to Compete program is having, is that we can't seem to get the word out about this remarkable plan. This is a non-profit organization who is bent on getting all Americans access to broadband internet. A bunch of nonprofits are involved. Best Buy, for example, is directly involved with them. And the focus, the initial focus, I should say, is that families who are eligible for the free school lunch program, notice not the reduced school lunch program, but the free reduced program, are able to access what you see up on the screen, 2 years of $9.95 plus tax broadband internet, no installation fees. The service area technically reaches all 50 states, and what you get for the $9.95 a month is a minimum speed of 1 megabit down, and a 3-year sign-up window is available for you. And again, I mentioned that this isn't for everybody. This is only for folks who qualify for the free, which is actually a much smaller sliver of our socioeconomically disadvantaged children. Now, you'll notice also that there are a number of providers listed down at the bottom of the screen, and I'll put the slide deck, Earl, back up in just a little bit if you can't see it from afar. But it's not just Connect to Compete that's doing this. As you can see, Cox Communication is directly partnering with Connect to Compete to get this work done. Bend Broadband or Cablevision, Charter, all of the, for lack of a better term, pardon the term, ladies, the big boys are playing. They want to come to the game and they want to participate in the Connect to Compete program. Not only do you get the internet connectivity through these programs for our students, thanks to an organization named RedemTech, kids at home can get access to $150 refurbished laptops or desktops, which come with a Core 2 Duo processor, 2 gigs of RAM, a wireless card, it has a DVD player, and Windows 7 OS as well. And you'll also notice down at the bottom, Microsoft has jumped into this fray as well and said, you know what, we'll give it this to you for $250. We'll give you a brand new laptop if you're a part of this this Connect to Compete program. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the real challenge here is that very few people even know about this. So what the County Office of Education and Texas has been trying to do is we're getting out there and trying to get the word out. And unfortunately, because of the low adoption rate, the low enrollment rate, some of the ISPs, we fear, will start to say, well, this just ain't going to cut it for us. So as you can see, some of the work that we've been doing here is in essence directed towards supporting broadband at home programs. One of the things that we're offering through TechSets is free digital literacy instruction across in an online setting. It's a MOOC offering if anybody's interested, or if you think you know of families or kids that might want to learn a little bit more about how to take advantage of the computer world or the internet. Certainly recommend that you give them our URL, bit.ly / digital literacy MOOC. So we know that the problem is there, but bottom line, colleagues, what we really have come to realize over the course of the last 2 or 3 years is that the battle is not going to be won in Washington, D.C., that the battle is actually going to be won through partnerships with organizations like the National Council of La Raza, with organizations like Cisco and CFY and so forth. And so I hope you'll perhaps visit our website and learn a little bit more about what it is that we're doing to support education and bring some of these equity issues to a close. And I thank you for your attention. Any comments or any questions? Anybody have anything they want to ask?
Thank you, Emil. Any questions from the public? Got a mic here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm from USC, and we actually have a community center that teaches parents how to use the computers because they feel that the kids are going to learn it, but it's the parents that are one of the things. And the Marshall School of Business and other schools will donate their machines, they'll clean them up, and they have agreements with the various vendors similar to RedemTech. And when they complete and get a certification, they take home a computer with them.
Very nice.
Now, of course, this doesn't solve the problem that they may not have connectivity
Right.
in their home when they get there, but at least it gives them a device that they'll be able to use. So I'm wondering if you have any similar projects with the universities here in San Diego.
Not that I know of at the universities here in San Diego. I do, however, know that in the state of Ohio, this is they're doing exactly what apparently is happening at USC. They're providing digital literacy instruction for family members and for parents and the elderly. There's up in Monterey County Office of Education is doing something similar. And what we're finding from these efforts is that 80% of the people who actually graduate from these kinds of learning programs end up adopting broadband in the home site. So hats off to USC and all of the organizations that are providing these kinds of services, because it actually, apparently, according to the studies, it's working. So thank you, I appreciate the comment.
Emil, on that, the statistic of 68% of adoption from the FCC, do you have any sense if that includes wireless as well, like mobile devices?
I probably shouldn't speak with any authority about this, but after having some discussions with Mr. Gottheimer, who presented this information to us, he mentioned to us that one of the unspoken reasons why parents aren't adopting broadband at home is because they're getting cellular systems for their kids. And so they're assuming that if the kid has an iPhone 5, well, why does he need a desktop or a laptop with the internet? But technically, I can't speak with any authority.
No, that's spot on. I think we did our own survey instruments within our county, and we found that we were surprised by the number of folks that were claiming they had broadband, but they were through their mobile devices. And our survey wasn't really set up for that, but
right.
You could see the spike in the data. So
sure. And of course,
it's an interesting phenomenon.
You can surf the net and you can check out YouTube, but what you can't do is write a paper and maybe put together a PowerPoint presentation. I guess technically you can, but anybody ever tried to do that? Put together a presentation on their iPhone 5 or their Galaxy? Best of luck to you.
Thank you, Emil.
Thank you, Liz.